Welcome to the Finvest podcast, Property for Investment. On tonight's episode, it's behind the scenes of the Melbourne property market. Guest speakers tonight are Lisa Harris from Finvest, Adam Liddell from Jim's Building Inspections, Nathan Keating from Finvest Finance, Jason Colby, BMT Depreciation, and Ivana Tempone from Nexus Accounting. For more information about Finvest, visit finvest.net.au.
Adam, please come and join us. Adam's working with a group called Jim's. Has anyone heard of the Jim's group?
Surely would have heard of the Jim's group.
Yeah, so it's Australia's largest set of franchises. Adam's here from Jim's Building Inspectors. I will bring up Nathan. Nathan's here working with Justin and in Pearl Finance. So how long have you been in finance, Nate?
20-something years.
20-something years. Look doesn't give it
Close
away.
enough.
So 20-something years in finance and resi and commercial.
Resi, commercial, equipment,
All of it.
everything.
All
Debt.
of it.
Anything debt.
Anything debt. And I'll get Jason. Jason's with us from BMT. Has anyone heard of BMT? For
Yep.
depreciation? Yep. And I'll bring up Ivana from Nexus Accounting. Today's session is designed for people to see, feel, meet and learn about how to use property for investment. Just for a show of hands, how many people do have a property, an investment property already? 1, 2, okay, so I reckon that would be about half the room. How many people have more than one investment property? Yeah, pretty much nearly still the same. How many people are looking to get started in using property for investment? Beginner. You can't put your hand up at the back then, mate. You've done 3 sessions with us. You're not classified as a beginner anymore, and you bought something.
You're cheating.
As the back of the bus rule. Okay, so thank you. That gives me a really good awareness as to how to work tonight. We run these sessions. Usually we've been running them monthly, and we've changed locations several times. The whole series is designed and called Behind the Scenes of the Melbourne Property Market, because we actually are not doing any selling of property at the event. It's designed purely for you to look at how to get started and learn from people that we've been relying on to help build up that muscle group of education first before we would suggest it's an ideal time to move into property. Property has performed incredibly well, obviously, over the last 36 months really in Melbourne. We've out-trumped clearance rates now in Sydney and seen growth now being the largest pool of where capital growth is happening for property Australia-wide. So the question really is not, and the theme tonight is not about why invest in property. It's more about trying to have a look at some of the topical pieces that are relevant in property for investing over tax, and we'll theme out some case studies, and we have some people in the room that have gone through this process over a year ago. And Ivana will be sharing some of the results in terms of just round half.
Oh, we're going to talk about refund checks, are we?
A little bit.
I get excited with that. Must admit, not your typical account.
And there's a few other bits and pieces that we wanted to cover off. I know that we're thinking about doing a bus trip. So for the first time, Finvest is looking at taking clients in a bus and jumping out in the field on location, where we'll be able to go and have a look at some completed properties and see what happens when people have gone through using some of the recommendations that we've given them. What are the results actually like for someone that started 24, 36 months ago, and what they look like now as completed properties and what their numbers look like. So part 1 of that is actually to have a look through a completed property and see from a builder's perspective eyes how they nitpick. Obviously, there's a lot of technical, and it takes you about 2 hours to do a full report.
Yeah, we allow about to 2 hours. That's on site, and then there's additional time
Yeah.
putting the report together.
So we're not going to bore you to tears and
No.
keep you for the full 2
Happy for
hours,
that.
but we'll certainly do some highlights, right? So,
Yeah, most definitely. And I think you guys go through quite a journey leading up to the final, getting the keys, and there's a lot of emotion involved. But when you get a building report, a bit of logic kicks in. And you actually start to look at, okay, does this work, does that work, and how it all comes together. So hopefully our reports can itemise that for you.
Sure, absolutely. And I guess tying in with the accounting comes into what you can claim and how you can claim it.
That's right, the exciting part of tax depreciation, guys. You've got to get excited about that. That's exactly right. So not a lot of people know about depreciation, which is why I get excited when one person says, yes, I do know about it. It's the second largest deduction you can make on an investment property, and like 80% of investors don't know they can do it. That's why we like to come out and have a chat to you, so try and show you exactly what you can claim, show you exactly what the government has decided to try and take away from you as well. There have been legislation changes. I was saying to Lisa before that I could talk about the legislation changes for 2 hours because they're the most exciting thing in my world. But
I think there are three main pieces of topic that I really wanted to cover off today. What I'm going to do is just sort of work through the three pieces with, I guess, a bit of open dialogue between the speakers. What we really love having is these sessions is that no one session then becomes the same. Every time we do these sessions, something new kind of pops up and appears. And what I guess am here to try and do is translate that in a few different components that are relevant. The difficult thing I find, and now I represent and work with, I think there's over 5,000 people in our community. There's over 100,000 people that watch our community via Facebook. I don't know if anyone's part of our Facebook property investment page. If you're not, please see Georgie and she'll boot you into that. What we do that's a little bit different, and I think why people connect to us, is that we're not professing to be a specific expert in all things in terms of property. All I'm here to do is help people understand that there's more than one mechanic in the toolkit required to make sure that you're really covering every dimension that's going to help you get that cumulative overall holistic result with each of the properties. Just because there is a new piece of taxation that you're able to claim on, it doesn't mean that you need to shift your gear post 100% to that one element and then miss out on the larger piece, which is that it is capital growth that's going to help you over time build wealth, and that there is no shortcut that you can really make to get you there. It's a small series of cumulative gains over a period of time that's going to amass the long-term benefits of asset. So all we're here to do, each of us, is to take out a little bit more in terms of helping you understand and de-risking this whole process along the way. Because anyone now can go out through realestate.com and find property, but the main issue that we find, and for me I'm working with over, in the last 12 months, I've seen over, I think it's close to, Moni, do you know how many sessions we've done for property strategy?
Over the last 6 months.
Over the last 12 months?
Oh my god. 100 something?
It'd be a few hundred.
Yeah.
So we've had a few hundred people through our doors coming in to learn about what to do. Some of them have issues with financing, and that's a huge one I wanted to cover today. That there's been some enormous changes, especially over the last 12 months in finance, which has rebuilt the whole landscape as to how we would suggest someone could even get started. You know, that has shifted so dramatically. It's enormous. I mean, I started off doing finance and knocking on doors and doing finance brokering at 21. I'm 36 now, and that was the beginning part of me understanding really what's involved with looking at loans and looking at lending and seeing how people get set up with house and land lending, and that was 107% finance days. You know, like, could you imagine? Could you imagine? I know we all laugh, but some people were able to get started in there, and now as a result have been able to capitalise on that. Sometimes it's actually more powerful to do less, and a lot of real estate companies that do investment discussions are all about that you need to get to a mass amount of volume to develop wealth. I just disagree completely. You know, what I've found over time is that those that have done less well and have had the ability to hold them have amassed a greater result than people that otherwise do gymnastics and look for these short-term hooks to try and bunny hop into. And I've got some clients that through my mentoring have got to portfolios of over 9 and 10 properties in 5 years, like Dean, for example.
Do you know, I was just thinking of that.
Really?
Thinking she's going right down that path. And he's a classic example that just went from, he didn't do them all with you though, did he?
No, I mean, that's the
He went and
interesting
bought
thing.
a few of his own without
Yeah.
your advice.
Yeah.
And he's really got a mixture of disaster in some of his things. And Lisa's had to fix them. So sometimes it's not one structure fits all, even from an accounting point of view. Everybody's unique. We were talking about that with Nathan. I'm thinking Jason, right? Where not everything's atypical anymore. And all the four big banks, they all think we're all atypical. We're not all atypical. And that goes from property to finance to accounting. What I can do with figures to make them look good for the bank, we work together with Lisa and make those figures look good so you can get the lending. Sometimes things need to be changed and tweaked a little bit depending on the circumstances of the people. But in this guy's position, he did some Lisa things and then went off and bought things in New South Wales that have just lost $200,000. And there isn't one of the towns where there's all the trouble,
Got a
The mining town.
which is an absolute,
disaster.
actually, yeah, and I had a lady come in, she was doing 18 years tax returns, disaster, okay, same thing, she went to Western Australia, was on big dollars, now she can't even sell her house, she's come back to Melbourne.
Yeah,
So those decisions are what, if you don't get the right advice, I believe, that poor Dean now, look, Nathan's done so well to even put the
get
story
funding
together.
Yeah.
Lisa just doesn't sell anything. Lisa does a lot of research in what she sells. And I'll be honest, all my clients that have bought properties in their super fund, in their individual names with Lisa,
Or with company.
they're within, I don't even think we've hit 12 months. Daniel hasn't hit 12 months.
No.
And the property's worth $150,000 more. It's already been revalued, he's ready to go again, just needs a little bit more money in the super fund, so we're waiting for June to click over, and he'll go again. But why? Because there's the growth. And like Elisa said, yes, I'm hung up on the BMT schedule, but sometimes you need a balance of everything. So you need the right property to give you the right result so that you can press repeat. And that's Lisa's job, where she does a lot of research before she just goes, oh yeah, this is good enough for you.
Does anyone know out of the Australian population what percentage of people own an investment property? Yes, 7.8 in the book. So please understand that this topic, this theme, is not something that you can largely draw a lot of conversation out of in a normal environment, because so few people have been able to go down this path, that have decided to go down this path. And then worse off than that, it gets less and less if you're searching for people that have more than 2 investment properties, more than 3 investment properties. It's less than 1% of the population that have been able to hold more than 5 properties successfully.
Wow.
Yeah. So 20,000 people Australia-wide have got that more than 5 properties. Would you suggest, Ivana, from looking, and I'd like to have some round robin on this from people that have got clients with wealth, can you think of maybe 2 or 3 of your clients that you've seen go from, becoming financially independent to actually amassing a pretty decent wealth package? What would the main ingredients be that they have? If you're looking at shares, property, geared properties, like what's the makeup?
Look, unless you're given shares like one of our clients, that's a completely different ball game. Daddy gave it to the son and the son then had millions and trillions of dollars. But anyone that has bought and sold shares over the years, look, I mean, you've got your ups and downs, but at the end of the day, you get your dividend, unless you hit a lucky break and you just happen to be in the right share. But none of my clients that I can say, yes, their share was worth $10 and now they're worth 20 million or whatever the case may be. No. But if I've got to look at myself or I've got to look at my clients, overall, property has, the growth in property has 10 times, you just cannot compare it to shares. I don't, that's just my experience and what I've seen as clients.
So when you've kept the books, like, because I'll share a little bit from my perspective, the ones that I know that are on the right path in terms of, you know, you've got your people that do your 80-20 and that there's that line, but then there's that spike. What would the top 5 clients that you've had have done over the last 25 years, do you believe, that have kind of self-activated their own result?
To create wealth.
Yeah.
They just keep acquiring property.
So that, in your opinion, over your history of the 25 years, is the keystone?
Can I tell them about my house?
Of course you can.
Okay.
Once upon a time.
Once upon a time. Now, I bought my home. Now, I'm not going to lie. It's on the computer. You can see it. I bought my home in Baldwin for $370,000. I put a house on there. That's fair enough. Would have been about $500,000-600,000. It's now $4 million. So shares are never going to outperform that. Unless you know you've got insider trading or, you know. In my time, I've done the tech stocks, I've done them all, it doesn't work. But I've held property, my father held property, and if you think about it, we all have to live somewhere. And especially Melbourne, where everybody wants to live in Melbourne. That lady that came in, I shouldn't say it, but she goes, I felt like saying, you've come from Western Australia, go back. Because we have just an influx of people that need to come and live here. Where are they going to live? They all need a house. So they are coming to live in Melbourne because we've got the jobs, we've got the money circulating. Whereas in Australia, there's nothing happening. So at the end of the day, a house, it's all about supply and demand. I was just talking to Nathan. Okay, the banks have got they're tightening their lending criteria. But at the end of the day, you know, we have a lot of real estate agents on our books. Ray White, Barry Plant, they've got all the same problem. And the problem is there's not enough good quality stock.
And you can't make any more in the areas that people want to live, which is really underpinned by the infrastructure, access to schools.
Pressure on trades. Trades are a big thing.
Yeah.
So they're really struggling with trades.
Absolutely.
And even looking, just use common sense. You have to go to a ballot to buy a block of land. You haven't got free choice in this country. Do you know that? You haven't got it. You've got to go in a ballot to pick the block you want. I think that's crap. But that just proves to you we're not creating enough urban landing infrastructure. We're not subdividing it quick enough because there's too many people coming here.
Yeah.
And Lisa's got to go on a Saturday and put her name down and then turn the ball.
The reason it's coming to Melbourne?
Yeah.
Because Melbourne is the best livable city in the
It's
world.
true, it is
For
true.
7 years.
8 years
7
now.
years in a row.
8.
8 now.
We're going for number 9, and it's the longest standing record for one place in the world of all time. So if people don't know how to make money in real estate in Melbourne now,
Yeah, but what country gives you... I think we're the only country in the world that negative gears.
To further emphasise Ivana's point, though, there's an old saying that you don't get rich from selling property.
Correct.
You get rich from buying well, and so
yeah.
the people that I know that have
Yes.
that have done well have all been very astute in the way that they buy the assets that they've got, and they're also bolstered and underpinned often by a cash flow story. So there's a cash flow component to what they do, which is what is funding and fueling the growth.
The
Ultimately,
ability
either
of
through
cycling
businesses or through the
But
investments themselves.
Don't you think it's like a 10-year cycle?
Yeah.
It's a 10-year cycle. Don't hold and don't buy and sell. You've got to buy and hold. But sometimes, and that doesn't work all the time, with Dean, with Tatiana,
Yeah.
in the end they bought the wrong product.
Yeah.
So sometimes you've got to go backwards to go forwards.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
We as
bought well.
Melburnians, our mentality is changing.
Yes.
Our mentality is, I'm Italian, well, I'm Australian, but I go back to Italy and I love Europe. But in the European countries, apartments are a home.
Yeah.
In Australia, we don't, in Melbourne, no, we don't know. Apartments? You want to live in it? No. Our mentality is changing because the land is growing outwards, and a lot of young people that work in the city can't go and live in Craigieburn or South Morang because it's too far.
It's sacrilegious.
So as young kids, and they can't afford it, what they do is now, let's buy the first stepping stone of an apartment, or let's rent in an apartment, let's save some money, and then let's move further out because we have an asset we can sell.
Yeah.
So we are becoming like London, like the UK, like Italy, like Europe. Our mentality is live in an apartment.
Yeah.
Do you know-
So you buy an apartment, and again, supply and demand, the right apartment, it'll go up in value.
I read an article that they're estimating that Melbourne City will grow to the size of New York City in the next 20 years because
Wow.
we're
Yeah,
in
that was on TV one
we're in
night.
that much demand. There's that much demand for inner city living
Yeah.
that the CBD will grow to the size of New York City CBD. Can you imagine that? Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, but our mentality's already changing.
But that's what it is. It's, if you would have spoken 10 years ago and
Yeah.
said, you know, Melbourne will look like New York City, people say, no, mate, I like living in my house. I like living in it. Forget about it. I mean, in what I deal only with investment properties,
Yep.
because that's the only property you can claim depreciation on.
Yep.
And it's amazing the suburbs you go to in 7 years, the change you've seen. I've been with BMT for 7 years.
Oh,
And the change I've
Lord.
seen in 7 years, suburbs that you go to that have houses now that can't get approval for apartments are putting these townhouse, like these joint together townhouse things, and they're coming up with new ways of condensing living. Like, it's amazing. Like, you go to a house that
And it's
you look
true.
at and you think, oh, they'll put 2 townhouses on there, and then they develop this ridiculous 7 townhouse thing, and you're just like, how did you even do that on this block of land? It's ridiculous. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
People now are giving away the land, and what's funny is that people have this mentality of, oh yeah, but land is, you know, I've got to maintain it, I'd rather go live in an apartment. And it's like, you wouldn't have had that 10 years ago, 20 years ago. People didn't have that mentality.
We've been lucky, and I say, look, that the asset, the areas that we've selected, the people that we're partnering in terms of the developers, we don't take risks. I've had clients that come in and see us that do a bit of due diligence naturally. I believe that everyone should, and come in armed and dangerous with some feedback on market, where they like, things that they would like to be able to pursue. And sometimes, you know, I'm not here to be a better price person to everyone. I'm here to make sure that you have the right amounts of each element that is going to help you build wealth. Yeah. So sometimes that might be for a client looking at a land-based asset. Sometimes people look at a group that sells investment property thinking, you're just going to flog me apartments. And to be completely honest, we're just absolutely not that person. We are not the same person to people. We are about looking at what is your goal, what's held you back from doing that in the past, and building you up, and so you're aware of the things that you can learn, and the hot spots. And it's not an area that's a hot spot, it's you within the condition that you arrive in that we develop to get you into the market safely, and that can produce a result for you that's not a short term. It's a sustainable, slow burn, long term benefit that you're able to draw out of having us as part of your team to help you work through different nuances that come through.
And Lisa, also, I think everybody should have a review.
Oh, of course.
Because
It's a
everybody's
makeover.
It's a
Absolutely.
makeover, because everybody's situation's different. Mine will be different to yours. Yours will be different to everybody's situation. Tax point of view, land point of view. Like, some of these people have got 2, they've got 1, they've got. So to have a review done and have the team that you provide, the other people, all our other real estate agents don't do this.
Yeah, and I think
They say, we'll sell you now you go there, and then you go there, and then you go there. You go to a real estate agent, he just sells you the key and says, do whatever you want. You don't get the advice, hey, if you buy you do this, this is your depreciation schedule, this is your go-to fix-it man, let's have a look, what have I bought, what am I buying, is it good, is it bad, finance, you don't get that as a family anywhere else you go.
It's really important too with finance, because every one of us included, our borrowing capacity has actually reduced in the last 3 months.
Yeah, for sure.
The borrowing capacity, the way the bank's behaving at the moment, and lenders in general, and the pressure that's being applied on them by the regulators, it's not possible to walk the fine line between ability to service and not service anymore. We're having to read every line of your bank statements now and reconstruct reconstruct the way that you're
Living.
living your life.
Because Alan, if you don't mind me sharing, you've been in the property market for over 30 years here in Melbourne, and you've done a lot of purchasing of various different types and styles of property. So when you have to go through and do an application, it's quite a full-on process for you now, would you say?
I did have a mentor a few years ago, and I learned quite a bit from you as well.
Yeah.
So I believe one thing, you should have got a good listening power. Einstein, when he was building his own things, people said, Einstein, you have done so much. He said, no, still I'm learning.
Yes.
Learning never stops.
Evergreen. That's right.
Everything is changing and things like that. So I listen to the people, and there is a saying that what they call common knowledge that's not a very
There's no
common.
such
You know? Yeah. So this is the
you're-
thing. If you listen,
Yeah.
you get to there. And there is a saying, another saying, the entrepreneur they say, if you're born poor, that's not your fault. But if you die poor, that's your fault.
We want to just talk a little bit about what's happening in lending. What used to happen is we used to have what's called a serviceability number based on,
It was called a HEM. It's a HEM number. It's a government, I think it's government produced, and it's basically an average of your cost of living. And so the banks would assume, didn't really matter what you told them, because they presumed you were lying anyway.
yes.
They would use a number which was calculated as to be the sort of the bare minimum that somebody could live off. Today that's still there, and some lender, every lender's different in how they're doing it, but every lender now has their own serviceability calculator. And so when you come to what Justin and I, first thing we're going to do is we're going to need you to be very specific about your expenses and actually go through the whole thing. Now we're going to help you to determine what's discretionary expenditure versus what's sort of mandatory expenditure, because if things are tight, you're not going to go and buy that extra pair of trousers or go out for dinner at the restaurants and what have you. So we can sort of cut some of that stuff out, legitimately. But we're still going to go through everything top to bottom. We've got our serviceability calculator, and then we're going to take, when we work out which lender we're going to take you to, we've got to then put you into their serviceability calculator, and we've got access to them all, luckily.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit of a juggling act, and so you might qualify, if you're on the borderline of pushing the limits a little bit, you might qualify for one lender and not qualify for another. And some, when I present to you, your list of options, this lender will say you've got, you can borrow 360, and this one might say you can do 600. Sometimes they are massively different.
Huge. And the finance chair, Nate, historically speaking, since we've run the series, is always one where we debate whether or not to put a banker and a broker on at the same time, right? Because at different times, different people are going to be able to be the flavour of the month. Versus when you go through a broker, how many different platforms can you access at the same time? Around 40?
I've got 30 or 40.
Yeah, so around
At least
40
at
lenders.
the moment, the 4-tier banks,
Yep.
you wouldn't go to them. Because
No.
they're very fickle in who they're lending money. That's what we're talking about with Nathan.
Yeah.
At the moment, there's not a lot going to the 4-tier banks.
Yeah.
They're all the others.
The reality is, if you're credit worthy, you will get money. So I don't want you to think that you're never going to get the money. It's
Yeah.
just,
Just the way of working it.
you can't leave it to the last minute, because it is going to take a little bit longer than you used to.
Yes.
We have to do a lot more due diligence before we submit you. If we do that job right, we'll have collected 95% of the answers to all the questions before they actually ask them, so that when we get in, we get a nice clean run at it. And we're building up a reputation with the lenders that we deal with the most for presenting. Now I'm actually I'm submitting client application forms with expenses that say $3,000, and I'm presenting a serviceability that shows $5,000, and I'm saying I did a recalc of what they've done, and this is actually $5,000. So ignore what they've said, because that's better.
And that's really important to understand, guys. We're here, and our design is that we're here to meet the brief of helping you build a portfolio. When you go in alone, you're self-representing, and you cannot necessarily understand the nuances that each of the systems like and dislike. Did you know, for example, that, like Bank of Melbourne have a completely different appetite to another lender in comparison to what type of property you're going for, what type of expenses you have, we've got one lender who, a client unfortunately was mid-application, and the lender had changed the rules during the application. They're about to settle a property in less than 4 weeks. And even though they'd been in the same industry for 10 years, the bank rejected it. And they had a 20% deposit. Can be going by finance rules that you've had as experience and you've been through it a few years ago. Even if you've not been through it 3 months ago, it's completely different. Things that we as professionals and as pros, we're in the industry for literally hundreds of clients at the same time, representing people doing either apartments, or different people have different appetite to different things. The rule books are completely shifted. I'm so grateful to seeing what's happened over the last 36 months, because it's helped people gain more than what they've ever been able to gain short term. Yet it's the hardest it's ever been to get in. Yet it's the cheapest it's ever been. So it's extremely attractive to people on the outside looking in. Extremely attractive. But they simply don't understand the mechanic as to how to make your money move the right way, how to make yourself look as desirable as you can to lending, and to cross that great divide. Because the great divide is this: the average price of property in Melbourne is now in the sevens. Does everyone understand that? It's over $700,000 to buy an average property in Melbourne. What happens in the 10 years? Yeah, so everyone knows that in a major capital city, in every capital city in Australia, that property historically has doubled every 7 to 10 years. So if we are just to use that same blueprint, it will mean over, 7 figures as the average for every suburb that's a major suburb that has over 10,000 people per banking code, and that's a normal population. Means that you're not at high risk in an area that's too small to have it grow. That's the usual goalpost. Is that still the goalpost now, 10,000? Where the insurers say it's okay and that's a proper suburb? Yeah. So think about those little micro suburbs that keep popping up on your GPS. I mean, I look at my car and mine's only 2 years old, and there are so many new places that are there
I drive
that
around
just don't even, it looks like you're driving through a paddock.
Oh God, Melton
and
West.
It's not. Ivana had touched on this thing called land ballot. So do people know what a greenfield land development is? What greenfield, do you know what that refers to? It refers to a brand new big master plan parcel of land that's been cut up, and that they're doing what's called stage releasing on the land development. So usually when you go through stage releasing, just so you can understand the scale of property opportunity in Melbourne, north-southeast of Melbourne CBD, there is over, I'm pretty sure it's 130 estates, north, south, east and west, that you could be selecting that's just greenfield land. So in other words, that was the stuff that was zoned rural, that someone's pocketed and parcelled together, and then from those parcels they've put in some amenity sometimes, and then they've cut it so it becomes a new suburb or a new area. So a classic.
Then they subcut it and subcut it. It becomes Harkness.
Yeah. Correct.
That's right.
Correct. So there are 2 types of manufacturing a result in property. So the big people that do Tats Lotto property are the old farmers that have just hit Tats Lotto, because the developer then says, we would like to buy a parcel of land off you. And that's where you hear people having these massive surges of growth, almost like buying a Tats Lotto ticket, where it's just instant wealth because they've decided to partner with them, build infrastructure, and then they create a mini centre. And does anyone know some of those big names of some of the ones in Melbourne that have done well? Anyone?
Jubilee Estate.
Sorry?
Jubilee Estate.
Jubilee's one of them. Anyone else?
What of it? 30, 40 years ago, nobody used to
Point
go.
Cook's a huge one,
Yeah.
huge one. I know some people that live in Point Cook that are here.
Yeah.
Sunbury.
Sunbury's a
done very
huge
well.
one,
Quite
absolutely.
north of
Yeah.
Barry
Oh, for
Cran-
sure.
South
Cranbourne's
Orange.
about to
that way.
pop.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
And that was sitting at the dreg list for how long?
And no one would go to Cranbourne. Now it's
Absolutely.
House after house after house.
Yeah. 12 months ago, I used to be taking clients out through the Werribee piece. And Werribee has a huge amount of government infrastructure that's come on board. It's a very established old part of Melbourne in terms of how much is built out there. In that whole Western Corridor, that Western Corridor is actually the fastest growing metropolis in the whole of Australia. Yeah, so that's, you know, your Hoppers, your Tarneit, your Werribee,
It's on the back of
Wyndham
hospitals and infrastructure is actually going out there.
Huge amounts of investment are there. Yet, here's an interesting thing. I was out at a land office, which I do now pretty much every 2 weekends, just for fun. And I was at the land office, and I've been working with these people with Lend-Lease. Has anyone heard of Lend-Lease? They're one of the major four. So like you have major four in lending, you have major four in land developers and the major players in land. And the lady that was the head of that land office that sits in that dusty showroom that's just land, it's got literally just pegs in the ground in parts of it. She'd been there since the beginning of that subdivision, which was now for 4 years. She was camping in this little
Shed.
like the size of this room.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
that's right.
Previous to that, she was working in another one for 6 years.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm thinking, your existence, for God's sake, like you're literally in this little like a donga,
It's like a
right?
it's a shipping container with a window.
Exactly.
That's what it is. Yeah, pretty much.
Exactly. And this woman used to be an Olympian for Australia, mind you.
Wow.
So she just
So
likes.
she was an
just,
active Jackson, and
She
then
just
now,
likes the relaxing nature of it now. Like no training, just sitting in a shed. I'm
and so
happy with
she's
that.
a pro. She's like us. She's been in the industry for over 10 years, focusing camping out in the land, in the Western Corridor of Melbourne.
Wow.
And for the first 6 years, she bought one piece of land with the land developer that's out there in the west. For throughout that 6 years, the property had grown, just a block of land. Can anyone take a guess at how much the block of land had grown for that first part for 6 years? It had only grown by $60,000.
Wow.
Yeah, so she'd bought it for over 150 nearly 10 years ago. And she was in the industry. She knew all the other parts of subdivisions that were out there, because there's over 30 master plan subdivisions that are out in that corridor now. And as a pro, she was only able to make 60 grand off one transaction. She cut her losses and had rebooted herself. So she got her money back from the market by holding it for that period of time. And then she ended up buying in the master plan that she's in now. And since then, she's been able to go again twice within the last 4 years.
Wow.
So it can be quite healing to sometimes sit down, to regroup, to reboot, to understand that just because it's a blanket theory to say, yeah, that corridor's the fastest growing, doesn't mean that everyone in there is making the most money out of everyone in the country and property. And even sometimes the pros don't get it right.
But that's the advantage of working with you guys is, you know, if you're actually out looking at property, it's quite daunting.
Of
It's
course.
where do I start? Do I go north, east, west, south? When you've got guys like, you know, Month Finvest, you're kind of doing that legwork for everybody. And even from what I see, you know, there's a lot of builders going broke these days.
Oh my God,
and
isn't
they're
it
all
scary?
struggling. So
Isn't it scary?
and I've done quite a few with Lisa and the team now. They're picking good quality builders in good quality areas. So that's half the drama, because you guys will go through all the process of finance and making that commitment, and then get to the end. And if you're let down by a poor construction program
Oh.
or supplier,
Yeah.
it's a lot of pain and suffering. So
It sure is.
so there's a lot of value to, you know, and these guys have got a great network of developers, right through from, you know, to the apartment sizes as well. So
It's interesting, the builders, there are builders going bust at the moment, which is bizarre given how much building is going on. But
Yeah.
there's a massive consequence to this infrastructure build that the government's doing. Because the infrastructure build is dragging all the builders off the work sites and onto the roads. It's taking all of the resources, the sands, the concretes, and it's dragging that out. And so you've got these poor builders who are quoting on fixed price contracts, and then waking up and realising the
Their
cost of
margin's
concrete's
gone.
gone up,
It's
the cost
eroded.
of all these people gone up. And so
Yeah.
we've got these builders that are really struggling.
Yeah.
And the government's out there tooting their trumpet about how awesome they are for
Yeah.
investing all this money.
Yeah. So just to give you a nutshell summary, I want to wrap up today. I really encourage you guys, if this is your first time coming to one of these sessions, to continue to feel welcome to come to these sessions moving forward. Each of them is quite different and unique, because as you've seen tonight, the conditions of the market change. There's different pieces that become more relevant pre and post end of financial year. We want to start drilling down and start covering a little bit more boot camp style specific education, as well as commentary, which we can't do now, but we will be doing in future sessions. I want to be able to start covering styles of investing with more detail. I want to start learning and being able to cover at least structuring on a beginner level, and also including you guys on some of the adventures that we're going to be taking out on the road on the party bus. It's not literally going to be a party bus.